we want to look specifically at the intersectionality of the experience of hate online by Jewish and Muslim women. We're a team of 6. There are only 2 of us here today. There were going to be 3, but Loretta has fallen victim to COVID again. So we're covering her bit. So some of this material we know well, and some of it we're actually working from notes, okay? So let's start off. Okay, issues around hate crime. Okay, we have hate crime laws in England, clearly. Current protected characteristics include race, ethnicity, religion, sexuality, disability, and transgender. Police forces are obliged to record an incident as hate crime if the person believes it were motivated on the basis of hate or of those characteristics. But in practice, many hate crimes and incidents never come to the attention of the police. Even when a victim does report a hate crime, it's often not recorded as such. And we know that prosecutions are very low. So as well as an entry point of reporting that is already worn away and minimal, there is attrition through the system in terms of prosecution. The context here is that criminal law we are proposing doesn't necessarily fit well for things like hate crime. It's often concerned with discrete incidents such as street robbery, where an individual is targeted for a particular crime by a particular individual at one moment in time. Hate crimes are much more complex than that. They often involve repeated targeted behaviour by one offender, multiple offenders against selected victims. It's a far more amorphous, complex scene to respond to. It's also very difficult for law enforcement agencies, for anyone outside of a group who's being targeted, to understand the impact of the crime, because it's connected to the personal identity and history of the victims. And that means the impact of what might seem a trivial or one-off incident to a bystander or a police officer who does not share the personal characteristic or history of the victim of that crime, they might not fully grasp it. Also, the impact of hate crimes goes beyond the individual, and we'll be unpacking this a little bit, looking at the online safety bill. There's a wider impact. It doesn't just have an impact on the person it's happening to. People who share those protected characteristics are witness to this. So the overall context is absolutely important. Things change. Your experience of expression, your feeling of liberty to express are affected by witnessing hate crimes against others and the toxic environment that they create. We also want to address this intersectionality. It's also a related issue here because of the sometimes inability of the criminal justice agencies to understand the concept of intersectionality. With the topic of hate crime, this is taken to refer to when hate crime victims, for example, women, are based on different aspects of their identity, and that may be their gender, it may be their race or their religion. Academic research is beginning to look at these areas. One of our team, Irene Zempi, for example, is publishing work at the moment about the intersectionality of being a Muslim woman and the experience of hate there. And we're very pleased to be working with her. So while academic research is beginning to respond to this intersectionality and understand it, you know, we are suggesting that perhaps still the criminal law is not currently equipped for understanding the highly impactful experience of receiving hate directed at you when you sit in this intersection and nuanced place where you're being targeted for many aspects of your characteristics.
Good morning, everyone. So one thing that our project is going to be looking at and trying to evaluate is the legal response to online hate. So we're going to be looking at the online safety bill. It's not yet law. We're going to see how effective it is at dealing with online hate directed at, in particular, Jewish and Muslim women. So I just want to make some preliminary remarks about the bill. this morning, just to say that it's got a long way to go before it becomes law. It's gone through various stages in the House of Commons, but it's not finished. The third reading has been delayed until sometime in the autumn. After the third reading, it will go up to the House of Lords and will go through the same stages in the House of Lords. And so it's likely to undergo quite a few changes before it becomes law. So the comments I'm going to make this morning are based on the current version of the bill, which was last amended on June the 28th. So in terms of the structure of the bill, it's really quite simple. It has a priority of harms based on the criminal law. So there are priority offences which are contained in Schedule 7 to the bill. These include terrorist content, racist abuse, fraud, and child sexual exploitation and abuse, and one or two others. The government can add more offences to Schedule 7 as the regime continues. But with respect to priority offences, the duty on the tech company is to proactively search for these illegal offences online and to mitigate them, that is, remove them, take them down. And the tech company will be held to account by Ofcom as the regulator. And failure to take down priority offences will result in a fine, quite a heavy fine for the tech company. The whole idea behind the bill is that any content that's illegal offline is also illegal online. Any offence that's not listed in Schedule 7 is a non-priority offence, and the duty on the tech company there is slightly different. They only have a duty to remove that content if it's brought to their notice. They don't have to proactively go out looking for it. And again, they are held to account by Ofcom as regulator. There is then a third category of harmful but legal content. Now, the duty on the tech company to deal with that depends on the tech company's own policies, which should be made clear in its terms of service. But there is no requirement for a tech company to remove content that's very harmful if it's legal. This is the way that the bill protects free speech. There are some exemptions. The bill will not apply to journalistic content. Now, this may be a problem because we know that some news publisher sites do publish racist and misogynistic and harmful material. We know there are white supremacist news sites, there are Holocaust denial news sites. Russia Today is explicitly excluded from the exemption, so that will be subject to the bill, to the law, because it spreads disinformation. And the government has been urged to add further exemptions to the bill, such as Press TV, which also is a disinformation channel. The whole point of exempting journalistic content is to promote freedom of the press, which is considered important for democracy. Similarly, comment sections on news publishers' sites are exempt as well. The idea is to encourage public engagement with the news and public debate. But as we heard yesterday in one of the sessions, there is a lot of hate speech on online comments, particularly under certain newspapers and so on. So that's likely to be a problem. Search engines are also exempt, like Google. Again, search engines are responsible for a lot of racist, Islamophobic and anti-Semitic content. In terms of judging illegality, this is known as the illegal safety duty. The bill tells tech companies that they have to base the judgment on information that is reasonably available to them. with reasonableness in part based on the size and capacity of the provider. Reasonableness is commonly used in statutory language, but how is it likely to play out in practice? Well, the smaller tech companies are going to have a less onerous illegal safety duty. But again, you know, this is not a good thing because smaller platforms like 4chan and BitChute, as we know, have users who promote a lot of hateful content. And because there's a less onerous duty on these smaller sites, bad actors can migrate their illegal activity to them. It might be a draw for them. At the other extreme, bigger social media companies could argue that because of their size and capacity and the corresponding volume of material that they have to moderate, that it would be impractical for them to, to judge everything that's likely to be illegal online. The other thing is, before a tech company moderates or mitigates any illegal content, the bill says that they have to have reasonable grounds to infer that all elements necessary for the commission of the offence, including mental elements, are present or satisfied. So the tech company has to be satisfied that all the elements of the criminal offence are evident. That's the mental element and the actus reus and the mens rea. Now that's a very difficult assessment to make. The Crown Prosecution Service has trouble making that assessment when deciding whether to charge someone. You might ask how a tech company is going to do it. Also, they've got to be satisfied that there's no reasonable grounds to infer that a defence is available. So it's going to be a very tough judgment. And as it says on the slide, the safety measures will depend on service providers making the correct judgment about types of content. The other thing is that most hate speech offences require a high mental element. They require intention under the law. So there has to be intention to incite religious hatred under the Public Order Act. And that's very difficult to find evidence of. So in practice, most of what would class as hate speech or hate crime is likely to fall into the legal but harmful category and be left on the site. So the legal but harmful content, the main takeaway from this slide is that there's no requirement on tech companies to take down any content that's harmful as long as it's legal. There are no minimum standards to judge what is legal but harmful. The overriding principle here is transparency. In other words, how the tech company deals with that content depends on its own policies, which should be stated clearly in its terms of service. So what the regulator is going to do is require tech companies to comply with their own policies. And the idea is to promote transparency. They will be held to account for that compliance. And the idea is to remove inconsistent decisions taken behind closed doors in California about what content is left up and what content comes down. With respect to violence against women and girls, which of course is part of what we're looking at, we're going to be looking at specifically online violence against Jewish women and Muslim women, that intersectionality aspect. But it was acknowledged at the committee stage of the bill that women and girls receive disproportionate levels of abuse online. Despite that, there has been no provision in the bill for making violence against women and girls a priority crime, a priority harm. It's not listed as a priority harm. Sexual offences are listed as a priority harm, and aggravated offences, those are offences where a weapon is used, violent offences, but nothing specifically relating to women and girls. And At the report stage, the Labour Member of Parliament for Pontypridd in Wales, Alex Davies-Jones, said, put simply, in their approach to the bill, the government are completely failing and falling short in their responsibilities to keep women and girls safe online. It was suggested at the committee stage that either violence against women and girls be specified as a priority harm in Schedule 7, so that tech companies have to take it down proactively, or failing that Ofcom as regulator issues a code of practice for tech companies to follow with respect to moderating content which amounts to violence against women and girls. But the regulator, Ofcom, has not given any assurance that it would produce such a code of practice. And just the final slide. At the report stage, an amendment was tabled by Joanna Cherry, who's a member of the Scottish National Party, to include an amendment, well, it was tabled to make social media companies subject to UK anti-discrimination law, namely the Equality Act 2010. Now, the Equality Act is not criminal law, so there's no provision at all in the bill for compliance with UK anti-discrimination law. She's tabled an amendment to require all tech companies to not harass, discriminate against or victimize someone related to a protected characteristic when moderating content online. And she specifically has done this to prevent tech companies from moderating comments by women in a way that discriminates against women, and also to prevent tech companies from removing content expressing gender-critical views. Under the Equality Act, gender-critical views are a protected philosophical belief. And therefore, if her amendment passes, gender-critical views will not, tech companies will not be able to implement policies which remove them. Apparently, they have been removed previously. All right, thank you. So those are the comments on the online safety bill, which we will evaluate once we get round to that with the project.
Right, we're on to the last bit. So, okay, we've created the space that we're working in. We're a multidisciplinary team, so we've drawn from it various strands. You think between us on the team, we've got criminology, psychology, law, and sociology and politics. So we've got a lot of vested interest in research questions that might emerge from this problem area. So to boil it down, we're interested in where the harm lies in terms of hate crime, and it's not just the individual, it's about the atmosphere, the environment for everyone who lives with those characteristics and also observes those characteristics. We can see that women and girls are disproportionately experiencing abuse online. And we also know that they may be targeted for various characteristics they have. So looking at the complexity of the intersection, looking at the nature of harm, we're noticing in the online safety bill, for example, that although psychological distress is recognised, and that's fantastic, but it doesn't cover the experience of, that space, that chilling effect, and what it's like to observe, not just experience, but observe people who you identify with based on the same characteristics and notice the experiences they're having. So we felt very strongly there is a need to document this experience and the experience of witnesses. And there is also a need to see how policy is applied. And that's not just testing the new online safety bill when it happens, but it's about looking at the attrition within the system. Why don't people report? Why is it not recorded? Why is it not prosecuted? And we're also very conscious, there are a number of us on this team who've worked with third sector agencies who support victims of, it may be crime, hate crime, it may be stalking, it may be domestic abuse. But we've all come to understand through our work that sometimes the trusted agencies are the third sector agencies, not law enforcement, and the need for the relationships to be understood and for us to elicit as much information we can from the most trusted agencies, we need to engage all of those people. So just quickly, these are our proposed research aims. Our objectives are to understand the nature and scope of hate speech directed at Jewish and Muslim women, to understand the direct and indirect impacts of that, to explore victims' perceptions of why it happens as well. Let's look at their experience and the meaning making that occurs through this experience. And really importantly, we want to evaluate the effectiveness of the policy and the legal responses to the situation. We're planning a number of outputs, and some of those are recommendations, and some of them are toolkits that we would want to circulate to the agencies who will support and largely facilitate a lot of this work. And we want to engage beyond academic communities, beyond social media platforms. We want to engage with things like blogs, with social media, and actually speak generally. How we want to do it is mixed methods. I mean, did you expect anything else? You've got a multidisciplinary team here, so you're going to have mixed methods. We want to look at online surveys that might give us some quantitative data, but we want to really look at the nuanced experience of the women that we work with, and for that we want to do interviews, but we also want to employ new technologies that involve personal documentary making. And that's largely because the benefits to the participants and the researchers. If you train, if you make the participant their own researcher in terms of the skills that they're using to collect the information about their lives, but also the freedom to create that documentary making and their own narrative, we kind of feel it's mutually beneficial, perhaps empowering, and we can't understand anyone's personal identity. We have to hear from them. So that's a real quick thing about what we're doing, and really we're here and we're grateful to be here because we want to ask you some questions. We're at the stage where we've written quite a full bid. We think we've addressed a problem that's necessary. We hope we've understood the priorities here, but really we want to ask you these questions. So please feel free to ask your own question, but if you feel that you could respond to any of those, we'd be incredibly grateful. Thank you.